So again, welcome. This is the Food Factor, Preventing and Managing Diabetes Through Nutrition. And I am Afia Bediako, Eat Well Program Coordinator with WorkWell NYC. And I will be joined shortly by panelists Darwin Blanc and Brenda Dash. Darwin is a wellness coordinator for WorkWell NYC, a certified lifestyle coach, health coach, and personal trainer. And he also will be leading our diabetes prevention program, an upcoming cohort that will be just specifically for men. Brenda Dash is a registered dietitian, leading as a wellness coach, supporting programming like our hypertension program and the diabetes prevention program. So I will give a brief introduction about WorkWell NYC and then move into our presentation. There we are. WorkWell NYC is the city's employee wellness initiative. We aim to help you live and work well. Our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for employees to live healthy, active lifestyles. And we offer this programming in the work site and then remotely. We offer health and well-being resources and programs just to help support you move more, be well, take action to prevent disease, and eat well. The programming today falls within our Eat Well programming area. And there are several of this sorts of program that are available remotely. On today's agenda, we'll be answering questions about choosing foods that help prevent and manage diabetes, managing weight, which is connected in some ways, what to look out for in packaged foods, and smart snack choices to stabilize blood sugar. In addition to responding to questions that you posed to us live today, in addition to some of the questions that were posed ahead of time upon registration. Okay, so I'll begin with some basic definitions just to lay a groundwork so that we'll all have a shared understanding as we begin. So diabetes is a disease that occurs when the body can't use glucose or sugar normally, resulting in blood glucose or blood sugar levels that are too high. 1 in 10 Americans have diabetes, and diabetes, along with its complications, are the 4th leading cause of death in New York City. Prediabetes is also a consideration, and over 30% of adults have prediabetes, meaning they are at risk for developing type 2 diabetes, and this is in the US. Approximately 5 to 10% of those people with prediabetes will develop type 2 diabetes each year. I also wanted to invite you to assess your own risk. So I'm placing in the chat the CDC prediabetes risk assessment, so you can check that out and clarify if you are someone who would be considered who has prediabetes. You can use the assessment to learn that. So there are several types of diabetes, and they're shown here. Type 1 diabetes is the kind where the body doesn't make insulin. It's an autoimmune disease, and oftentimes something that someone might be born with. Type 2 diabetes is something that could be developed, and this is when there's a decrease in insulin or insulin resistance, where a person's body isn't using it correctly. And this can be influenced by several factors outside of genetics, lifestyle factors, environmental factors. So this is one that can be gotten later in life and also avoided. And then gestational diabetes occurs during pregnancy. This includes insulin resistance, and it is something that serves as a risk factor for developing type 2 diabetes post-pregnancy. So there are several risk factors for type 2 diabetes that are not within our control. Things like genetics, race, our age, so they're listed here. But luckily, type 2 diabetes isn't necessarily something that one with those unavoidable risks. It isn't a definite that a person might have diabetes if they have any of the risks on the previously shown slide. There are several things that can affect one's risk of developing diabetes, including lifestyle factors like diet and physical activity or inactivity, a person's weight. Being overweight increases a person's risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And also, like I mentioned before, gestational diabetes can also increase a person's risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So COVID is major in all of our lives right now. And it is part of this conversation as well, as there is an effect, a relationship between COVID and diabetes. So persons with type 2 diabetes are at an increased risk for severe COVID complications or severe illness related to COVID. People with type 1 diabetes may be at increased risk for severe illness related to COVID. And it's important to note that this time really has affected us in all kinds of ways. And though people are paying more attention possibly to staying safe connected to COVID, this communicable disease, we also need to be aware that sometimes the stress of this pandemic, disrupted routines, relating with our medical providers in different kinds of ways, and even unhealthy behaviors that affect diabetes management all might be something that happened related to the COVID pandemic. So it's really more important now than ever to prevent and manage diabetes with the things that we can control, including healthy food and physical activity. I also wanted to make sure that I gave an initial explanation of nutrition labels. This is something that we promised to cover today. And just to give you the graphic that's listed here and some basic consideration regarding nutrition labels. So when we're eating packaged food, it's important to look at nutrition labels. And some of the things to look at include order of ingredients or ingredients in general. Looking at ingredients helps us to determine if the things that are in the package are things that we want to eat, that we should be eating. But order of ingredients also is something to consider, because oftentimes what's most in the package is going to be listed higher in the ingredient list. So if the first few ingredients are something that you don't really want to be eating, note that that's what the package is mostly made of. So you might want to make a different choice if the first few ingredients are not things that you should be consuming. One example might be sugar as one of the first few ingredients. That probably isn't a food that is going to be a highly nutritious food. Also, it's important to consider package versus serving size. Sometimes, like this label that's listed here, has a package size of there's 6 servings within the package, but sometimes this is a little deceptive if there's something that we might consume a whole package, but the serving is only a portion of the package. So pay attention to this. We also need to look at fat and sodium, and the target there is aiming for no more than 5% daily value per food item. So we want to keep the fat and sodium to 5% daily value, and you can see the percentages listed, percent daily value listed. And then lastly, added sugar is a consideration, and this is also shown on labels. We want to avoid foods with added sugar if we can, but really consider how much of it we're consuming, and the highest marker is 40 grams per day. So we don't want to include added sugar that's more than that. And I will just give you a preparation for today's discussion. As I said before, we're all beginning muted, and we'd like you to interact with us by using the chat feature. So I see some of you already have inserted some things into the chat, but you definitely can ask questions via the chat feature. We will not be taking participant questions out loud, so no need to raise hands or expect to be unmuted, but do enter any of your questions into the chat. We also invite you to ask for a friend. So, it doesn't have to be you that you're asking for. It can be sort of anonymous if you want to direct questions just to the panelists, or just, say you're asking for someone else, and that's totally fine. So we invite you to start inserting some of your questions into the chat box, and I will actually pause the slides for now and bring our panelists up, and then we can begin by answering some of the questions that were posed in advance, and then we will begin to answer some of the questions that you insert into the chat feature. So Darwin and Brenda, if I can see you, welcome.
Thank you.
Are you both? Okay, there we are. Excellent.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So we got lots of questions today, and we actually have a lot of participants on the line as well. So this is very exciting. This is a topic that seems to be either one that's people are confused about, or just very excited about, or maybe something that affects many people that actually might be a likely reality as well. So I want to begin just asking, the topic today is food factor, how food relates to diabetes, diabetes prevention, prediabetes, et cetera. So the first question I'll pose to Brenda is, how does food relate in preventing and managing diabetes? And are there some things that are important for folks who are trying to prevent diabetes or living with diabetes, important things for them to know about food?
Wow, that's a loaded question. All right, so I want to start off by going through what happens when we eat food. So then you have a better understanding as to why typically we recommend certain meal planning techniques or approaches. So every time we eat food, food is broken down into glucose, sugar, because that's the end process, or it's the finalization of the breakdown of foods, right, during digestion. And as a result, our blood sugars naturally increase. In response to our blood sugars increasing, the pancreas secretes the hormone insulin, and what insulin does, it attaches to the sugar in the blood, because in the blood it's not doing anything for us, and it shuttles to the cell. It knocks on the door. I have food for you. The cell opens up, and the glucose or the sugar is delivered where the body can use it for energy. But for some reason, when we have diabetes, that process isn't working properly. So we definitely eat food. Food is broken down and digested. Our blood sugars go up, but two or more things can happen. Number one, the pancreas may not be making insulin, and as a result, the blood sugars stay in the blood. It can't go to the cell because it doesn't have that shuttling system. Or your body may make insulin. The insulin attaches to the sugar in the blood. It shuttles to the cell, knocks on the door. But for some reason, that cell doesn't hear that knock. And as a result, it stays shut. It doesn't open. So again, the sugar remains in the blood, and it means that your blood sugars are high, hence diabetes. So when we're talking about food, we're saying, well, what can we do to help that process? We want to be able to help the body be able to maneuver sugar from our blood to the cells. Well, we can do one of two things, or many things, let me say. But we can start off by understanding what foods are going to have a big impact on our post-meal blood sugars, meaning after I finish a meal, what types of foods are going to cause my blood sugar levels to go up quickly, versus what kinds of foods are going to cause it to have a minimal post-meal effect. So then we want to look at, well, what foods do we have? What are our energy nutrients? And typically we have our carbohydrates, we have our fats, and we have our proteins. And they are broken down amongst our different food groups. We have our grains, our starches, which are your carbohydrates. You have your fruits, which are complex carbohydrates, as well as your non-starchy vegetables. We have our low-fat dairy products, protein sources, which are your meats, your chicken, your fish, as well as your non-animal proteins. And we have fats, both healthy and non-fats. So carbohydrates, our starches, are the foods that have the biggest effect. And if I had seen you all, I would have given you a cracker like this so we could do an experiment. But typically, when we put a cracker in our mouth and we hold it, we don't even have to chew before we start to feel the cracker dissolving. And the reason being, we have enzymes in our mouth that starts the digestion. So by the time this cracker reaches our intestines, it's quick, it absorbs quickly, and as a result, our blood sugars respond to that quick absorption. So the goal and the essence for eating with diabetes is to slow this process down. And we slow that process down by combining foods that are going to cause our blood sugars to go up quickly with foods that will not, so we create that balance. So I want to use my favorite helper, the plate planner. And I love the plate planner because without thinking, it enables us to create what I call balanced meal plans. And the reason being, it has 3 segments. It has half of the segment of the plate is what we recommend for non-starchy vegetables. And those include your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your spinach, Darwin, you can help me out. There's an array of non-starchy vegetables. Then we have our protein choices, which again is your chicken, your fish, your red meats. I always recommend to focus on protein packaging. And when we say packaging, what proteins are high in fat? Are they processed, which means they're high in sodium? Yes, we're eating for diabetes, but you're eating for overall health. So you always want to look at what's the healthiest food options in each of these groups. And lastly, we have our starches. And I want to say not all starches are equal. And I know a lot of people always hear this theory, stay away from them because they're going to affect your blood sugars. They're going to cause your blood sugars to rise. I want to say that it's okay to have starches. Starches shouldn't be considered bad. It's just being able to understand what can I eat with them and what's the portion in order for them to create that balance. So I just want to share, I went cooking, or I did a little bit of cooking today, and this is a prime example of a balanced meal where I am including a starchy item such as a potato. I have grilled chicken and I have non-starchy vegetables. And why I say this is balanced, yes, the potato may have a big effect on my blood sugars, but when combined with a protein item, as well as non-starchy vegetables, I will have a better control over my post-meal rise in blood sugars. And in addition, your appetite. As long as we slow down digestion, you're going to find that you stay full for a longer period of time. And as a result, you don't find yourself going for those snacks as quick and often. So I think that's it in a heartbeat when it comes to, and I'm stuck when it comes to controlling for or eating for diabetes, is being able to create that balance between the foods that will cause your blood sugars to go up quickly versus the ones that do not.
Thank you, Brenda. We heard you, even though you got stuck only in the end. I'll invite you to make sure that you stay close to your mic too, because there were some sound issues a little bit, but so just remember to stay close to your mic.
Okay.
Darwin, so let me just, what I heard thus far, I'll summarize because it was a lot, and then pass it on to you, Darwin, to see if you have anything to add, and then to pose our next question. But thank you for that initial sort of understanding about how insulin works. And I won't try to repeat it because it was lengthy, but there were some questions about that. So hopefully people were able to get the understanding from what you said, in addition to speaking about the plate, using that as our sort of guide, particularly how we balance it to make sure that we're eating a variety of nutrients, but that the sugars aren't going to our bloodstream immediately because they're balanced with the other kinds of foods there. So Darwin, definitely, if there's anything you want to add about food and diabetes, please do. And then I'm going to sort of add to that. Weight management is something that's of consideration with regard to diabetes. So if there are any notes that you want to give us about diabetes and weight management, or weight management related to diabetes.
Absolutely. So in a lot of ways, one's weight is connected with diabetes, just as one's weight is related to many other chronic conditions. And so for those with prediabetes, we can start there with prediabetes. There are studies that have shown that intensive lifestyle interventions, such as healthy eating and exercise, that leads to approximately 5% of weight loss, actually decreases the overall risk of developing type 2 diabetes by up to 58% for a lot of people. And so when it comes to type 2 diabetes, research actually shows that about 50% of men and 70% of women are obese at the onset of diabetes. But what this means is that there are non-obese individuals that can be diagnosed with diabetes, and that there are many people who are obese or overweight and they never develop type 2 diabetes. So while there is a connection between weight loss and diabetes, it's still likely that obesity combined with a genetic predisposition is necessary for type 2 diabetes to develop. And so when you have diabetes, being overweight just brings added risk in general. That's why weight loss is so heavily emphasized. By losing just a few pounds with healthy eating, exercise, you'll start to feel better. And so as you start to feel better, you'll have more energy, and it's just these benefits from exercise that, and weight loss that kind of adds to the story. And it will get easier to just manage your diabetes in general, all while reducing your risk for developing other related problems. And while weight loss is important, I think, and Deborah, please feel free to add, I think the main aspect to really think about in how the body functions is that the effect that exercise has on the body, because exercise helps to regulate blood sugar. Losing weight isn't easy. Exercise isn't easy. But the key to weight loss for most people is simply finding the right combination of exercise, healthy foods, portion control, and just just managing the intake of calories as well as the expenditure. So you don't necessarily need a fad diet, to lose weight. It's just managing and balancing our intake.
Thank you. You guys are saying so much, and I'm hoping that folks are hearing it, because these questions are not like short answer questions by any means. And you're giving great responses to the depth that they deserve. I'm going to reiterate what I heard you say as small as I can, and then I'll bring it back to either of you to add if you want to add anything. But diabetes, it sounds like, can be avoided with weight change, with weight management. I heard about 5% a weight change, 5% weight reduction, somebody could avoid getting diabetes. And that's not necessarily a big number. That's not like, lots of pounds, depending on how much a person might begin, their weight they begin at. So I think that's something to consider, something to recognize. People have asked about reversing diabetes or reducing their risks. There were a lot of questions about that. So yes, you can look at your weight, look at a person's weight. And if a person is overweight and at risk for developing diabetes, a reduction in that weight, a small reduction, can affect their risk. In addition, weight loss, how do we do it? This balance of food and fitness, basically, portion control, quality of food, and making sure that we have enough physical activity to balance out our consumption so that weight isn't added in excess, basically. So that's as good as a summary as I could give. But please listen, guys, and we hopefully will also make the recording available so you can listen to this again too. But you guys are really offering some great tips, so I appreciate it. People have asked about concerns for family, concerns for friends who they're around. So we appreciate you all who are considerate about the people who are around you. But the answer to that last question speaks to the fact that you're empowered to make some changes to affect your risk. Even if a relative has it, even if many relatives have it, having a genetic predisposition doesn't mean that it's something that is guaranteed. So yes. So one of the things that we also, I'm sorry, Brenda, did you want to add anything else about the weight loss or weight management component?
More just actually, I just wanted to say that with the weight loss, it enables cells, here I go with my knock again, to be more responsive to that knock. So that's another reason why they do promote the weight loss.
So someone asked about insulin resistance. So that's exactly what you were talking about. So I love the knock, I love the physical, but so cells, basically the insulin resistance piece is how responsive the cells can be. So that's what you just answered.
100%, so yes.
So I want to discuss drinking and snacking. So there's some questions that have come up now about hydration. That's what I mean by drinking, just to verify. Some questions about hydration, water, juices, these sorts of things. And also snacking is a question that's of consideration. So I can begin with Darwin on this, speak to it a little bit about what to be aware of for healthy snacking, what to pay attention to. Again, if you want to reduce risk or manage the condition. So if you can speak to that, that would be great.
Definitely. Let's tackle the snacking aspect of that question. So when it comes to snacking, what's important are two things: how you snack and what you snack on. The danger of snacks for most people with diabetes or people even without diabetes, that snacks, I don't know, it happens to me, but they somehow transform into an extra meal. It's like that, those two potato chips, I don't know, somehow turns into the entire bag. And so even, you know, sometimes those 2 or 3 cashews, it turns into, you know, the entire bag as well. And so, and this is because, you know, oftentimes we snack maybe in front of a TV or, you know, while we're sedentary. And so that's why it's easy to over snack. The good news is that people with diabetes, they don't have to give up snack time. We don't have to make an enemy out of, you know, snacking. Snacking during the day is actually beneficial to blood sugar because, you know, especially if your meals are so spaced apart, it's a helpful way to just balance blood sugar levels and keep them from dropping. Snacks also help you regulate your appetite. Just by snacking, you keep yourself from not becoming too hungry and avoid overeating during your next meal. And if you overeat in your next meal, then you can really spike your blood sugar levels, and we don't want that. Um, but when it comes to snacks, I think the most important thing is that, you know, you make sure that they're slow digesting, um, fiber rich, and that they're actually snack size. And so, even though I mentioned potato chips earlier, that's an example of something that isn't slow digesting because potato chips will quickly get your blood sugar through the roof. So you want to make sure that they're slow digesting, rich in fiber, and snack size. Slow digesting can be something that, you know, has protein included, healthy fats, and fiber. These nutrients tend to be slow digesting. So a snack should always include one slow digesting nutrient. If you were snacking on crackers or grapes, it would be best to couple them with something that can help slow down the digestion, such as a nut butter, like an almond butter, or even a peanut butter, or a part skim cheese. And, you know, just a part skim cheese, that sort of dairy can add some protein and healthy fats to help you feel full for longer.
And I have to agree. No, I was going to say 100% agree. You know, focus on even within the snack to have a mixed snack. So you want to try and include a protein item or a healthy fat option to help slow down digestion.
Thank you both. I'll remind of Brenda's cracker sort of explanation. We eat that and it goes basically right in, not basically right into our blood, but kind of, you know? So if we're consuming things that are highly processed carbs, white potato, white cracker, that sort of thing, it's no good. But adding the nut butter, adding protein, adding dairy, this sort of thing makes a snack more of a mini meal. And that helps to balance out the blood sugar. But we have to make sure, because we're also considering weight, that those snacks are mini meals and not the full size of meals. So adding something to carbohydrates, peanut butter, something with fiber, protein, dairy, etc. Sorry, it doesn't have to be peanut butter, but a protein sort of food, a fat or something like that, helping to balance and also keep the serving sizes small. So those are really great. In the chat, I'm seeing some things about community propensity for diabetes. You know, like if you're part of a certain racial or ethnic group, this was addressed in the early part of the conversation, but also marketing of snacks and marketing of snacks to certain kinds of communities. So we are excited if you guys are into advocacy and, you know, doing what you can to affect some of that. So that's really great that it's of consideration. But yeah, we'll continue to answer some of the questions. So one of the things that I saw was asked in the chat box today, in addition to being asked about in our the questions that were sent ahead, is about breakfast. Breakfast could be a tricky time, possibly because of people's blood sugar readings in the morning, or because of the kinds of foods that might be popular at breakfast. That might be some of those high carbohydrate foods. So we'd love to get some ideas about breakfast particularly. And then one thing that I'll also add, considering sort of maybe the marketing piece, or also sort of access to good quality food, if you can, you know, speak to how somebody can manage an environment that might be, you know, if you don't, like, I don't know, live in the grocery store that sells affordable, high fiber, you know, appropriately portioned foods in the real world, basically.
Well, I think the real world when it comes to portion control is to realize that we are in a society where portions are just so much more bigger than what we typically need to be healthy or to survive, right? So that's number one, being cautious of how much we're having and to eat food in moderation. I mean, the beautiful thing about eating with diabetes is that it's not a restrictive diet where we say you cannot have. The key is the balance. So when we're talking about breakfast, and I don't know how I got all this food around me just for this presentation today, but this is a slice of toast, right? And if I was to have this toast by itself, as we've said over and over again, it's not balanced. It's just a carbohydrate process because it's not whole grain. And more than likely, it's not going to do well or it's not going to support optimal blood glucose control. But if I include a protein item, so for breakfast choices, if I have toast with an egg, and if I have high cholesterol, I may not necessarily want to consume the entire egg. I may want to remove the yolk because the yolk is the part that contains the cholesterol. I have a snack, I have a breakfast option that is balanced, but it's also fulfilling. Another option may be avocado toast, whole grain toast with avocados. Avocados are a healthy source of fat. So you do have to be mindful in terms of how much avocados you're using on the toast. But again, it creates a balanced breakfast that's tasty and it gives you option. For anybody who likes dairy products, I'm not too sure, Darwin, if you're a dairy person, but I love Greek yogurt. And sometimes I add additional seeds to it or fresh fruit. So again, I'm combining a great calcium protein item that's going to help post-meal blood sugar levels as well. So sometimes I think we overthink it, and especially when it comes to breakfast, I do think breakfast can be the hardest meal for us to create and to enjoy, especially when we're living with diabetes. Do you have any suggestions, Darwin?
Yeah, I think you can definitely attest to this as well as some of my other team members. I practically have my go-to for breakfast is oatmeal. Because and when I eat oatmeal, they're always the rolled or steel oats and not the instant kind because the instant kind of oatmeal is more processed. And so I have an oatmeal smoothie practically every morning. I throw in Greek yogurt, kale. I even this might sound a little bad, but well, not bad, but distasteful. But I microwave some eggs, and then I throw that in the smoothie too. Um, and so I just do that just to make sure the meal is actually balanced, and then it's balanced with proteins, it's balanced with carbs, and it's also balanced with the fat. And for those that may not like oatmeal, because maybe it can sometimes be bland, I would definitely recommend topping them with some fruit if you'd like to add some sweetness, and even adding some nuts to it just for an extra dose of protein.
And I definitely would say add with the nuts, especially if you find that you are living with diabetes and your blood sugar levels are uncontrolled, at least creating or adding that protein in will create a different or an additional balance for you, a different additional buffer. I wanted to actually go back to the drink, so I don't think we discussed the topics of liquids. And for me, that's one of the hardest or the easiest ways to have, number one, a negative effect on your blood sugars, but also on weight control. And mainly because there's so many empty calories within drinks. And that's both fruit juices, sodas, and in some cases, not Darwin's, because he's adding a lot of plain yogurt and vegetables, but in a lot of smoothies that are made with many variations of fruits in addition to fruit juice. So smoothies can work for you, but you have to be mindful in terms of what ingredients you're using to make them. So go with Darwin's and add non-starchy vegetables to your fruit juices or smoothies to create a better option.
I'll add something that's going through the chat too. I just asked for participant feedback about breakfast ideas, and we're getting some things that are coming through. A lot of nut butters, overnight oats, echoing some of what you both already talked about, eggs and veggies. Something that also was listed was eating foods that might not be what we might traditionally call breakfast foods, and that totally is fine too. I know that it's also cultural too, because some folks, the carbs might not be where you begin breakfast. You might have more of a heavy protein or veggie based meals, depending on what's sort of your norm. But definitely rice and veggies and meat can serve as breakfast as well. So I appreciate those responses. I also pose another question, and I will direct it to you, Darwin, about sweeteners. There were some questions that have come in about, well, prior to the session today, there was a question about artificial sweeteners, and someone also mentioned it too with colleagues who are drinking artificial sweeteners. But also some things that were asked about are like honey, maple syrup, monk fruit, stevia, which have natural sources, but there still might be some questions about the significance related to diabetes. So if we could just speak a little bit about sweeteners.
Absolutely. Me personally, I'm not a fan of artificial sweeteners. If I was to, I'm not a fan for them, I guess, because they don't really curb the sugar, I guess the sugar crave for me. And for most people that try to opt out of using artificial sweeteners, they may also go for, syrups or honey or molasses. But the thing with that is to also be careful with that, because they do have an impact on your blood sugar. So I think a question to also address is just, how we can cut back on sugar without depriving our sweet tooth. And when I say cut back, I don't necessarily mean, cut our sugar intake cold turkey, but really minimize the amount of sugar that we're taking in. So you can try cutting the usual amount of sugar you might add by half, and then, just wean down from there. There are many areas, whether it comes to breakfast or lunch or dinner, where we might, where we can, opportunity to cut back on added sugar. And that can be like, whether it's in our cereal, in our pancakes, in our coffees or tea. So those are opportunities where we can cut back on the amount of sugar that we're adding. When it comes to, as Deborah mentioned, drinks, swapping out the soda for water, swapping out the juice for water. If there are even juices available that have, decreased added sugars or even zero added sugars. So it's always important to just read the nutrition label on the bag, check out the ingredients and see what you're actually drinking. And, eat, definitely like compare food labels. You're gonna have to choose the amount, choose items that have the lowest amount of added sugars. But I think overall the idea is to cut back on the amount you're adding. If that's a little difficult, you may also want to add extract. Extracts can, like vanilla extracts or almond extracts, coconut extracts, sometimes it adds a flavor that, kind of distracts you from the need of using sugars. So I'm very curious as to, especially what Brenda thinks when it comes to artificial sweeteners, especially.
You actually took the words out of my mouth. In terms of blood sugar control, artificial sweeteners do not have an effect on blood sugars. So, I do have to share their benefits, but like Darwin, I'm not personally a fan of artificial sweeteners. But if you find that your blood sugars are uncontrolled and you want a sweetness without adding sugar or molasses or honey or any of the other natural sugars, artificial sweeteners will give you that taste without affecting your blood sugars. However, as Darwin had indicated, studies do show that people who consume artificial sweeteners in excess, it seems that they now then get that craving for other sweets, and sometimes they start overeating some of the baked goods and some of those other sweet foods that typically you don't want them to, or that you don't really want to have in excess. So you just want to be mindful of the amount that you're consuming. And that's all I have to add.
Thank you both. I heard you say mindful several times. So, that's something to really consider, folks. There are some questions that have come through about, You know, what if I have allergies, or does this food sound good or that food sound good? And I want to offer to you that what I'm hearing as a large takeaway from what both Brenda and Darwin have shared, no one yet said, don't eat this, you know, or you must eat these very limited sets of foods. So please do be considerate about options, because it seems like options abound. There are loads of options that exist, and making mindful choices can be really important. Um, so yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Can I piggyback what you're saying, and understanding that food is so important to us. You know, years ago when we talked about the diabetic diet, it was so restricted and everything had to be measured, and we told people no, no, no. And then we realized it was unrealistic. And if it's unrealistic, people are not going to stay with it. So we've learned from growing and observing, and we realize people's choices are important, cultural significance is important. You know, and I'll share an example. When I was working as a nutritionist, a lady came to me and she was newly diagnosed with diabetes, and she was crying as she was sitting in front of me. And I thought she was crying because of this new diagnosis. But in reality, she was crying because the doctor has shared that she can no longer have rice and she had to avoid bananas. And she had come from a culture where rice and bananas and plantains were a major foundation of how she grew up. So she was looking with despair because she was saying she can't eat what the family members are eating. She didn't know how she would go forward. Not only does she have this new diagnosis, but now she's been told that she has to rearrange her whole thought process around food. So we've come a long way now where, as I had shared earlier, diabetes is not a restrictive diet. It's understanding the effects of different foods on your blood sugars and how you can create that balance. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that, just to say, you know, food, nutrition in general, has so many added cultural and social dynamics that to eliminate one food, um, you know, or to, you know, marginalize one food, it can put you in a very uncomfortable situation. So the key is, at the end of the day, balance.
Super. I appreciate that response. And I think that it's a carry all too, because people often ask, what do I do? What do I eat? Give me a specific meal plan. We can't do that for the, you know, almost 300 people who are on the call, because everyone's desires, favorite foods, allergies, needs, et cetera, you know, are going to be variable. Somebody did mention looking at your own sort of like post meal recall and kind of seeing how things went yesterday or a few days before, that sort of thing. And that's really good too, because you can see sort of what was I feeling good with? What ideas did I have for breakfast this last week? Were they good ideas? Were they not good ideas? These sorts of things. And it can allow you for a person specific sort of outcome. So yeah, again, balance is crucial. It doesn't seem like nothing is off the table, but it's important to make sure we balance the kinds of nutrients. So we're not just consuming high, carbohydrate, quickly processed carbohydrates like white flours, starchy vegetables, et cetera, but keeping things in balance, and looking at your own experiences too. I want to sort of respond to a few questions that were had about specific things that might be good for diabetes. And I'll just reiterate this balance piece. So it isn't simple like do this and then you'll be good for forever. It is a sort of like a lifestyle consideration. The same thing about someone who reduced their risk with weight loss. And there was a question about, do they have to sustain that? Yeah, you know, this is a lifestyle kind of thing. So it isn't, there aren't necessarily, you know, do this right now and then you'll be good for forever. It's sort of like things that you need to be paying attention to for the duration that are good for your health in a variety of ways. I'm going to ask one more question and then bring our work to a close a little bit. So related to what I was just saying about sort of lifestyle, folks have asked questions about sort of co-risks like triglycerides, cholesterol, and some of these other considerations with diabetes. So we're talking about diet related to diabetes, but I also heard you say, Brenda, about healthy diet in general. So please sort of set the record straight and clarify for people about that and the interconnections of, you know, reduced risk for other kinds of things like cholesterol, but also just general health. And sorry, one last thing. This also connects to family, because some people are like, well, I have this issue, but this other person doesn't who's in my family, or they have this issue, but I don't. So it kind of answer all of that for us, please.
No, and I think it's a great way for us to end. When we, at the end of the day, there's no such a thing as a diabetes diet. And the reason being, I always say it's a diet that all of us should be following, right? And the reason being, it is varied. And in order for us to be healthy holistically, we have to consume a varied diet, a varied balanced diet, which includes foods from each of the 5 food groups, in order for us to receive all the vitamins and nutrients that each of those have to offer. So we want to monitor our sodium. So yes, when we have diabetes, we want to, but even when we don't, we still want to monitor sodium and reach that or be below that recommended 2,300 milligrams. Think of the label, 5%. We want to monitor our fat intake, and specifically bad fats. We want to avoid saturated fats and trans fats. As Darwin keeps indicating, fiber, fiber, fiber. We want to focus on foods that are high in fiber, so your whole grains, your brands, your fruits, as well as your non-starchy vegetables. We want to focus on lean protein because our heart health is important. We want to avoid foods that are high in saturated fats and trans fats, and look for those healthy oils, such as your monounsaturated and your polyunsaturated, such as in the olives and avocados. So when we eat, you want to eat for your total being, your ultimate wellness. And the diabetes diet just falls within those recommendations that I would share with everybody, including kids.
Thank you for that, Brenda. So yeah, balance, I feel like, is also reiterated in what you just said, and thinking about the highest quality of the different kinds of food groups that we're consuming. So before I close the presentation, letting you know about upcoming programs, I want to just consider that this is a time of year that celebrations exist, and sometimes, quite often, that includes food. So we also talked about, families who might be at risk for diabetes, or families, family history and that sort of thing. So what kinds of things can we consider now, and then just with celebrations in general, to do what you just said, making sure that we're having those high quality, oils and whole grains and that sort of thing in this season. Close us out with sort of what may be a few nuggets that we can take into the season with us about food and diabetes prevention in alignment with celebrating. And that's to both of you.
You want to go, Darwin?
Sure. I would say, especially with the holiday season in mind, definitely take this keyword balance, really balancing all the food groups, if at all possible. Even while you're in these social situations, these social gatherings where food is involved, keep the plate method involved. Keep the plate method involved, even if you have, different food varieties around, even if you have, the mac and cheese and, the rice and beans, the turkey, the salads, the green vegetables, keep that all in mind and try to maintain the plate method. And also keep in mind that, things won't drastically change, within the next day, within the 24-hour period. Some of these, that for people with diabetes, we have diabetes often as a result of, lifestyle habits or choices that we've made over a long period of time. So we can't expect to undo a lot of these choices, so quickly. So be gentle with yourself during the holidays. Continue to encourage yourself, and in the same way, remember that you have this knowledge and you are essentially a light to the rest of your family, because you can be bringing them a lot of this knowledge about the plate method and all of these other sorts of things that you're learning about. So that would be my message to you during as we enter the holiday season. What do you think, Brenda?
I would second everything that you're saying, and I would just say to enjoy the moment, enjoy the food that's in front of you. Think about the work that went involved in terms of making the food, and I think it will create a healthy relationship with food. Food is there for us to enjoy. We use it in celebrations, we use it to connect with families, and we still think that's important to do. But so while we're thinking that, in addition to adding on to everything Darwin shared, I would say enjoy.
Thank you both for that. I love that option. Someone put pumpkin spice in the chat as well. I know pumpkin spice, this is a season that's like the big thing. I think the feel good aspect and also the sort of like connectivity to food and relationships and all this kind of stuff is something that can be really present in all of your celebrations. It's not simply about just what is on the plate in the end. It's about some other kinds of things. So I think that's a really great takeaway, finding a healthy relationship with food and relationships with others. And I think that I also heard that in your points, Darwin, about sharing with others, so that these are tips that aren't just sort of like, I'm going to keep this to myself and I have to be different from everybody else and I'm eating this weird, unpleasant thing, but more like, this is what's good for me and likely for you all too. And, here is some more of it. I'll say a personal example. I baked a cake once for Thanksgiving that I changed the recipe to grandma's cake recipe. And I did reduced fat cream cheese and no one was happy about that. I learned, don't do that. Make the cake. I'm going to make the cake. You guys know this is cake. It's not healthy. Fine. But I'm also going to bring, whole grain, high vegetable, lean, well-balanced dish, because that's another option that exists. And I, want to make that idea available to everyone too, even though, the celebrations might also include smaller portions of some things that might not be the highest quality for our nutrition. I also wanted to add to pumpkin spice. Darwin, you talked about extracts. Spice also can sweeten things up. So that's another way to be sensitive about sweetening without adding added sugars. So thank you all. Thank you both. Thank you, participants, for your listening ear, in addition to the feedback and tips and tools that you also put in the chat from your own experience. So I'm going to actually bring us back to our slide set. And I'll invite the panelists, if you want to reduce your screens, feel free as I bring the slides back up. So I mentioned earlier that we have a diabetes prevention program that's coming up that is actually for men only or male only cohort. So the information is here and Darwin is going to be leading. So be in touch with him if you want to learn more or participate. Additionally, we have some other up and coming events. Our In the Kitchen with Workwell series is all about pumpkin spice and, whole grains and comfort foods in a way that are in alignment with healthful eating. So do join our chefs Tuesdays at 5:30. We have 3 more sessions and they're really great. So to sit in on and learn from them, even if you're not actually cooking, you just kind of get the recipes, engage with the other participants on, everyone's sort of experiences. They're really great demos. So I encourage you to participate there from the comfort of your home. We also have a prevention and primary care presentation that's coming in a few weeks. And this is actually a really important presentation that I want to highlight your attention to regarding some of the questions that we got on the panel today. We got questions about reading blood sugar numbers or how certain medications might interact with diabetes or diabetes prevention, or even how to get tested for diabetes or how to get pre-diabetes tests. So these are all questions that are really best posed to a medical team, not with the expertise of the panel that we had today. So the primary prevention and primary care presentation speaks about, having a doctor and how you are able to connect with your doctor and speak with your doctor to pose these kind of diabetes risk related questions. So we definitely encourage you to join that presentation that's coming in a few weeks. And then lastly, Calling All Artists, Art is Life virtual exhibit. So this is an opportunity to submit and view and be a part of art, which is really relevant in this time, this tricky time that we find ourselves in. So please check out all of those upcoming opportunities. In addition, our virtual classes, fitness classes, mindfulness meditation classes are ongoing, and we want you to join them. We talked about weight management and physical activity, and these are an option, for you to participate from the comfort of your home in many cases. Darwin, again, is a leader or was a leader in in our HITS class. We got some shout outs to him in the chat about that. I don't believe it's on the schedule still, but there are a variety of classes that folks can take advantage of with our virtual classes. So do check these out. And it is still flu season. And just like diabetes, there are interconnections with flu and COVID. So we want to make sure that people are armed with the best protection. And the recommendation is for all 6 months or older to be protected against the flu by getting a flu vaccine. So this is something that's available to you all as city employees for free. The Work Well NYC clinics have ended at this point. We don't have more citywide clinics planned, but you still have an option to get a free flu vaccine at a doctor's office, urgent care sort of facility, and many pharmacies. So take advantage of that by bringing your insurance card and getting the shot for free. And then lastly, stay in touch. So we really appreciated all your participation today. And we understand that these are questions that you want answered, and, you know, keep them coming and keep in touch so that you can be connected when upcoming presentations of this sort, or, you know, other relevant presentations for you are being offered. So stay in touch with Work Well NYC via the details listed here. So that is the closing of our presentation. Thank you for joining us today, and stay well.